Beneath the frozen surface of Greenland, where the winds howl across endless sheets of white, the United States once dreamed of building a secret city of ice. To the outside world, it was called Camp Century, a remote scientific outpost powered by a portable nuclear reactor, a bold demonstration of American ingenuity during the Cold War. Officially, its purpose was to study polar geology and test construction techniques in extreme environments. But hidden beneath this cover story was an audacious plan codenamed Project Iceworm, to create a vast network of tunnels deep under the ice, each capable of concealing nuclear missiles pointed at the Soviet Union. It was a vision that blended science, secrecy, and Cold War paranoia into a single frozen labyrinth. The timing could not have been more tense. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the balance of power between the United States and the Soviet Union rested precariously on nuclear weapons. Both sides scrambled for ways to ensure their arsenals could survive a first strike, guaranteeing the ability to strike back. Submarines prowled the oceans, missile silos dotted the American heartland, and spies scoured the globe for intelligence. Yet Greenland, with its strategic location between North America and Eurasia, offered something unique. A shield of ice vast enough to hide an entire army's worth of firepower. For US planners, it was an irresistible possibility, if the ice could be tamed. From the beginning, Camp Century looked like something out of science fiction. Engineers carved trenches into the ice cap, covering them with steel arches and packing snow on top to create long corridors. Inside, they built barracks, laboratories, a chapel, even a movie theater. A frozen city designed to house over 200 men in relative comfort. At its heart, a small nuclear reactor provided power, glowing like a symbol of modernity under layers of ancient ice. Photographs from the time show smiling soldiers in parkas, scientists in thick glasses, and American flags fluttering proudly against the Arctic wind. To the public, these images told a story of progress. To those in the know, they concealed a far darker purpose. Project Iceworm itself was breathtaking in scale. US Army documents envisioned a network stretching over 2,500 miles beneath the ice, capable of housing up to 600 nuclear missiles. The ice sheet, constantly shifting but seemingly eternal, would serve as camouflage, making detection by the Soviets nearly impossible. From this hidden fortress, the US could unleash devastating retaliation, a second strike capability buried in the frozen silence of the Arctic. It was a plan that promised security, but also demanded secrecy so absolute that not even Denmark, the country that governed Greenland, was fully informed. To admit the truth would have risked international outrage, not to mention panic at home. Yet for all its ambition, Iceworm faced a challenge that no spy, general, or engineer could ignore: the ice itself. Unlike solid rock, the Greenland ice sheet is alive. It flows, shifts, and creaks under its own immense weight, moving slowly but relentlessly like a frozen river. Tunnels dug in one season buckled and warped the next. Walls collapsed, ceilings sagged, and doors jammed as the glacier reshaped itself. Engineers worked furiously to reinforce the passages, but nature proved a more cunning adversary than the Soviet Union. Beneath the surface, the dream of a perfect missile fortress began to crack, quite literally under the pressure of time and ice. As engineers wrestled with the living ice, the political landscape above it was shifting as well. Officially, Denmark governed Greenland, but the United States had maintained a military presence there since World War II. Camp Century was presented to Copenhagen as a research facility, a symbol of cooperation between allies. In reality, Danish officials were kept in the dark about the scale of Project Iceworm. Few outside a tight circle of US military planners understood that the research station was designed as a prototype for a sprawling underground missile base. This quiet deception revealed the tension of the Cold War itself. Even allies were sometimes misled when national survival seemed at stake. Life at Camp Century became a curious blend of monotony and danger. Soldiers drilled into the ice by day, then returned to a world of prefab tunnels and fluorescent lights by night. Movies were shown in the recreation hall, sermons delivered in the ice chapel, and Christmas celebrated under tons of snow. The nuclear reactor hummed in the background, a steady reminder of the technology that made this hidden base possible. Yet beneath the routine lay constant uncertainty. Would the tunnels hold? Would the ice shift suddenly? Every creak in the frozen walls reminded the men that they were living inside a fortress made of something inherently unstable. The secrecy of Iceworm extended beyond the physical base. The United States invested heavily in studying the Greenland ice sheet itself, quietly collecting data that would prove invaluable decades later to climate science. Core samples drilled deep into the glacier revealed layers of ice thousands of years old, preserving ancient air and even biological material. For the Army, these cores were initially a secondary concern, a byproduct of tunneling. Yet in hindsight, they became one of the project's most enduring legacies. Long after the missile dream had collapsed, scientists would return to these samples to unlock the secrets of Earth's climate history. Despite these side benefits, the central problem remained unsolved. Iceworm was supposed to provide a stable and hidden nuclear arsenal, but the glacier refused to cooperate. Tunnels that sagged a few inches in one season collapsed entirely in the next. Reinforcement costs spiraled, and the reactor itself raised safety concerns in such an unstable environment. Reports began circulating within the Army that the ice cap could not be trusted as a permanent foundation for missile silos. What had once seemed like a bold stroke of genius began to look more like a dangerous fantasy. A reminder that even the most powerful nation could not bend nature to its will. By the mid-1960s, the Pentagon quietly lost faith in the project. Advances in intercontinental ballistic missiles and submarine launch systems gave the United States alternative ways to secure second strike capability. The strategic logic that had made Iceworm seem vital began to fade, leaving behind a costly and fragile experiment. Officially, Camp Century continued to operate as a scientific outpost, its true purpose never publicly acknowledged. Unofficially, the dream of burying an arsenal beneath the Greenland ice was already melting away, buried by the very environment that had promised to conceal it. For years, the true scale of Project Iceworm remained hidden from the public. Official reports spoke only of scientific research, of bold men pushing the frontiers of knowledge in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Photographs showed smiling faces, snow tractors, and the hum of modern technology beneath the polar sky. To the casual observer, Camp Century was a story of exploration, not militarization. But beneath this carefully crafted image lay one of the most ambitious, secret projects of the Cold War, a plan to transform Greenland's ice sheet into the largest missile base on Earth. Only a handful of officials in Washington fully understood what was at stake, and they guarded the secret closely. Yet secrecy itself became a liability. Denmark, though formally allied with the United States, was not fully informed about the military ambitions under its territory. In the fragile dance of Cold War diplomacy, even small deceptions could have large consequences. If word leaked that the US was planning to house hundreds of nuclear missiles beneath Greenland, international outrage would be inevitable. The Soviet Union could seize the narrative, painting America as reckless and deceitful. Even allies might recoil. Thus, Project Iceworm was wrapped not just in layers of ice, but in layers of silence, deception, and plausible deniability. It was a weapon hidden not only from enemies, but from friends. Inside Camp Century, soldiers and scientists adapted to a life unlike any other. They ate meals in mess halls carved from snow, exercised in gyms under frozen ceilings, and slept in bunks surrounded by walls of ice. The tunnels echoed with the clang of machinery and the constant hiss of snowmelt. To some, it felt like living inside a science experiment. To others, it was a slow march through claustrophobia. Letters home spoke of pride in serving on the frontier of science and defense, but also of isolation, boredom, and the unnerving groan of shifting ice above their heads. For many, the camp was both a marvel and a prison, a reminder of the strange sacrifices demanded by the Cold War. The nuclear reactor at Camp Century, once a symbol of progress, soon became a source of anxiety. Designed to power the entire complex, it sat precariously within an environment that could shift at any time. Reports surfaced of radiation leaks, mechanical malfunctions, and maintenance challenges. While officially downplayed, these incidents raised disturbing questions. What if the reactor failed beneath tons of ice? What if radioactive materials seeped into the glacier? For a project already struggling with collapsing tunnels and unstable ground, the reactor became yet another risk, a silent danger buried in a frozen wasteland. By 1967, the US Army quietly shut down the reactor and began winding down operations at Camp Century. The dream of Project Iceworm, the vast missile city beneath the ice, was effectively abandoned. Yet the cover story of scientific research endured, leaving the world to believe that Camp Century had been little more than a noble experiment in polar engineering. In truth, it had been a bold but flawed attempt to weaponize the Arctic, a hidden chapter in the story of nuclear brinkmanship. Though the tunnels would eventually collapse and be swallowed by the glacier, the secrecy surrounding Iceworm ensured its legend would survive, buried in archives until decades later. When the last personnel departed and the tunnels were left to the mercy of the glacier, Project Iceworm seemed destined to fade quietly into obscurity. For decades, little was said of the base beyond its sanitized public image as a Cold War curiosity. Yet the ice keeps secrets only temporarily. As the climate began to change in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, scientists realized that the remnants of Camp Century, including its nuclear reactor waste, fuel, and biological material, might not remain entombed forever. The very ice that once served as camouflage was now melting at unprecedented rates, threatening to release hidden contaminants into the environment. What had been a failed military gamble was now re-emerging as a potential ecological hazard. The discovery alarmed both scientists and policymakers. Greenland's ice sheet, long assumed to be stable, was showing signs of vulnerability. Studies suggested that as warming accelerated, the debris of Camp Century, diesel fuel, radioactive waste, even sewage left behind by soldiers, could eventually leach into surrounding ecosystems. For Denmark, which had once been kept in the dark about the project, this revelation was particularly bitter. The secrecy that had defined Iceworm now seemed less like strategy and more like betrayal. America's Cold War ambition had not only defied diplomacy, it had left behind a toxic time bomb for future generations. As documents were declassified in the 1990s and 2000s, the true scope of Project Iceworm became public knowledge. Journalists pieced together the audacious plans, revealing that the Army had once dreamed of hiding hundreds of nuclear missiles beneath Greenland's ice. Historians marveled at the scale of the idea, while critics pointed to its recklessness. The revelations painted a picture of a Cold War defined not just by brinkmanship and paranoia, but by a willingness to gamble with nature itself. What had once been science fiction was now historical fact, a reminder of how fear can drive nations to the edge of reason. For the public, the story of Iceworm became both fascinating and unsettling. The image of American soldiers living beneath the ice, building a secret city powered by a nuclear reactor, captured the imagination. But the darker reality, that this city was meant to conceal weapons of mass destruction, added a layer of unease. Documentaries, articles, and academic studies began to treat Camp Century not only as an engineering marvel, but also as a cautionary tale. It became a symbol of the Cold War's extremes, a place where innovation blurred into hubris, and where the pursuit of security ignored the lessons of nature. In recent years, Iceworm has returned to the spotlight for another reason: climate change. As the ice recedes, what was once hidden is slowly being exposed. Scientists now monitor the site not for signs of Soviet spies, but for evidence of leaking contaminants. The legacy of Iceworm, born of paranoia and secrecy, has shifted from geopolitics to ecology. Its story is no longer just about the Cold War. It is about the enduring consequences of decisions made in secrecy, and the way those decisions can echo long after the men who made them are gone. Beneath the ice of Greenland, the Cold War is still thawing, one meltwater stream at a time. For the men who once served at Camp Century, memories of the ice city are often described with a strange mix of pride and disbelief. Some recalled the camaraderie of building something so ambitious in such an unforgiving environment, while others admitted to a constant sense of unease. Letters and oral histories describe the daily reality of living beneath tons of shifting ice. The groan of walls that never stopped moving, the suffocating closeness of the tunnels, and the eerie quiet of nights broken only by the distant rumble of machinery. To them, Camp Century was both an experiment and an ordeal, a reminder of the lengths to which the Cold War pushed ordinary people in the name of strategy. Historians today often point to Project Iceworm as one of the most audacious and reckless ideas of the Cold War. On paper, it promised a nearly invulnerable second strike capability, a hidden arsenal stretching across thousands of miles. In reality, it underestimated the power of nature and overestimated the ability of technology to master it. The collapse of the tunnels was not just an engineering failure. It was a metaphor for the limits of human ambition. The United States, for all its resources and determination, could not outwit the glacier. In this sense, Iceworm stands as a lesson not only in military history, but also in humility. Yet even in failure, Project Iceworm contributed to the broader story of Cold War innovation. The lessons learned in Greenland informed later military engineering, from Arctic survival techniques to the challenges of operating nuclear reactors in remote locations. The ice cores drilled during the project, once a byproduct, became invaluable to climate science decades later, helping researchers understand the Earth's atmospheric history. Ironically, the most enduring legacy of Iceworm may not be its secret weapons plan, but its accidental contribution to environmental science, knowledge born from secrecy that ended up serving humanity in an entirely different way. The secrecy surrounding Iceworm also reflects a broader truth about the Cold War, that the line between defense and deception was often thin. Democracies justified extraordinary measures in the name of survival, while publics remained unaware of what was being done in their name. Project Iceworm was hidden not only from enemies but from allies and citizens alike. It was a reminder that secrecy itself had become a weapon, a tool for maneuvering in a world where transparency was seen as weakness. The Cold War did not just militarize landscapes, it militarized information, and Iceworm was one of its clearest examples. Today, Project Iceworm survives as a story that continues to resonate. It speaks to the fears of an age when nuclear war seemed not just possible, but imminent. It reflects the ingenuity and desperation of a nation willing to build a city under the ice to protect itself. And it serves as a warning of how choices made in secret can leave legacies that outlast the conflicts that inspired them. From the frozen tunnels of Greenland to the halls of Washington, the ghost of Iceworm endures, a hidden chapter of the Cold War still thawing into history. Looking back, Project Iceworm embodies the paradox of the Cold War itself, a period defined by both extraordinary innovation and extraordinary fear. Nations raced not only to outbuild one another in weapons, but to out-imagine each other in secrecy. In this climate, an underground missile city carved into the Greenland ice did not seem absurd. It seemed logical. That it ultimately failed is less important than the fact that it was attempted at all. Iceworm's story forces us to confront the strange reality that, under the pressure of paranoia, even the most outlandish schemes could gain approval, funding, and human lives to bring them into being. The secrecy that once shielded Iceworm now amplifies its legacy. For decades, citizens of Denmark, Greenland, and even many in the United States had no idea what lay hidden beneath the Arctic snow. When the truth emerged, it was not only shocking in scale, but unsettling in implication. If such a vast and reckless project could be concealed so effectively, what else remained hidden in the archives of the Cold War? Iceworm thus lives on not just as a military plan, but as a symbol of the shadows in which democracies and dictatorships alike often operated. In the stark white silence of Greenland, the ruins of Camp Century still slumber under layers of ice. The tunnels have collapsed, the machinery long buried, but traces of human ambition remain entombed. As climate change continues to erode the glacier, those remnants may one day re-emerge, forcing the world to reckon not only with the past, but with its enduring consequences. In this way, Iceworm is not just history, it is unfinished business, its full impact still waiting to be revealed by the slow melt of time. For storytellers, Iceworm has become almost mythic, a tale of soldiers living in frozen corridors, of a reactor humming beneath ancient ice, of weapons that were never built, but almost were. It is a reminder that history is not only written by victories and defeats, but also by the strange experiments that lie between them. These stories, hidden for decades, show us that power is not only about what was achieved, but also about what was imagined. In that imagination lies the true fingerprint of the Cold War. Ultimately, Project Iceworm is remembered less for the missiles it planned to conceal, and more for the questions it leaves behind. Questions about secrecy, about ambition, about the hubris of believing that nature could be conquered by engineering alone. Questions about how far nations will go when fear becomes policy. And questions about the legacies we leave, buried in ice or otherwise, for future generations to confront. Beneath the Greenland snow, the Cold War is still thawing. And in the story of Iceworm, we glimpse the extraordinary lengths to which humanity will go in the name of survival.